to be a problem.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, cheers. My bad.
It's going with the picture.
Hi. If you're staying, there's a sign-in sheet going around for me as well. Please and thank you. Thanks for staying and see what I have to say. I am almost done with my capstone project for my graduate course, and this is part of it. I'll graduate December 17th. Several people in here were part of this research. My endorsement is in English as a second language. So I'm working with students who do not speak English as their first language, and I was looking at how teacher beliefs affect their lesson modifications. This poster is really big. I'm not going to go through all of it with us because I just want to focus on the important points, but afterwards you can ask me any questions you have and I'll bring up whatever you want. So first, just to give you an idea, I know that our district is pretty small and that as far as ESL students, we don't have very many. But it's important that we understand that this is the fastest growing student population currently that exists. Our district even gained 10 students in this population from last year, or from 2017 to 2018. 10 students in a single population is pretty big. I haven't seen that kind of growth in any of the other populations that we have. So what this study is going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to focus on the positive modifications that our teachers are already using, which is a lot. I found a lot of positive information in this study. But it's also going to help us learn about more appropriate ones, and the one that I was specifically focusing on is called systemic functional linguistics. What that does is that teachers are focusing on teaching English and content at the same time. And so it takes away the need for that pullout. It takes away the need for your ESL students to have to miss content in order to learn English. And it's done so in a meaning-making way. You're analyzing texts in the content area, but also analyzing them for why did they use that English there, and what does that mean, and how are we using it in that case? The participant demographics are here just so that we can see. I used 6 participants. We've got quite a range of experience levels on here, and as well as a range of subject areas. So we've got several places that we're looking at for this data. So just to let you know what I did, first the teachers, they filled out a beliefs survey, and that let me find out what their beliefs were on how English language learners learned. What did they believe about how students learn? And then I went and observed their classroom with something called the CRIOP tool, and that allows me to look at the actions that they're currently doing and see if those beliefs are interacting with their current actions and how they're currently acting in the classroom. After that, they told me what would they have done differently if they had an ELL student in that classroom. How would they have modified that lesson in any way? And then we did a final interview where they could explain anything else that they would have done. I could go through how I analyzed it if you want to, but suffice to say that I was looking for common ideas and patterns throughout all of my data sources, which is how you get the best, least biased results. So these are the results from the survey alone, where 1 is disagree, strongly disagree, and 5 is strongly agree. So we can see that we've got good attitudes here. Teachers disagree that a student's first language is not a valuable resource. That's what we want to see. We want to see that teachers are using a student's first language in the classroom to help them. They disagree that students are an obstacle to themselves. They don't believe that students are just not going to participate because they don't want to. They don't believe those kinds of things. And they don't believe that students are not capable of learning. Our teachers do wholeheartedly believe that. These students are capable of learning, and they're capable of learning the same content, which is exactly what we want to see. We do have some disagreement on how we learn a second language and the content that comes along with that. And we do see that teachers do believe that English proficiency is capable after 2 to 3 years, which is not really quite what we want to see, but also we have disagreement on what proficiency means. So it's completely understandable to see that result. These are the final results. I found a lot of themes. One really positive one that doesn't show up here is personal relationships. There's not a single teacher that I saw that did not score a 4 on making personal relationships with their students, which is awesome. It's amazing. But it didn't just show up in our final results because it didn't go across all of them. The final results that we see is that teachers currently do believe and are acting on that idea that vocabulary and language is an essential resource. and also that students can learn with individual modifications. So all the survey showed me was that they believed that first language was valuable. They are using vocabulary in the classroom, although sometimes, for the most part, what we're seeing is very generalized modifications rather than things that would be specific to helping ELL students, which makes sense. We don't have any current ELL students. And for using individual modifications, they're already doing that. Again, a very generalized modifications that we're seeing being used, not specific to ELL, but again, that's understandable. Now, I did find another one. A third and unexpected outcome is that teachers are using some aspects of systemic functional linguistics already. The teachers that I saw, they are analyzing the data in meaning-making ways in the vocabulary and the text that they use. But either they don't know that they're doing that, or they don't understand that that's an important thing to do for ELL students. So this is just to show you that the literature shows that these are all very common. The things that I found are not like random out of the wall. They definitely are verified by the literature. So overall, my recommendations for our school is to first just bring attention to the positive things that we're doing. Making relationships with those students, using vocabulary as a meaning-making resource in the classroom. It's going to help us use the modifications we didn't know we're using more often, and it's also going to bring those into light for more teachers to follow when this population does explode. Second, we need some professional development in what it means to learn a second language. That was probably the biggest thing that I found that most teachers had questions on. How do you learn a second language?
Mr. Edwards, please come to the office.
What does it mean to learn a second language? And what are the needs that I need to be looking for students that are learning a second language? And also professional development in systemic functional linguistics as a more effective type of accommodation for students. And the way that actually this kind of goes with our writing plan. Analyzing texts that are used in our content area for English is going to help our students become better writers in addition to better English speakers. And it also shows an increased understanding of the content as well. So it's not just for ELL students, but it's going to help all of our students all the way around. These are my references. And now I will leave it open for any questions that you guys might have. I know I spoke fast. So
You did good.
tell me if you have
So you're
questions.
talking, if you had, say, Spanish-speaking students in a science class, you're talking about as one of the primary resources would be content in Spanish about that unit?
Yes, absolutely. So using their first language is essential when they, especially when they first come in at a lower English proficiency level. But the idea of systemic functional linguistics, which is only one type of modification, right? There are several that we can use, and the ones that we're currently using are good. The idea of systemic functional linguistics would be to give them their information in their first language and also in English. And so as they continue to gain an English proficiency, we can start looking at the sentence structure used in scientific texts. So I would not be focusing on, oh, this is what an adverb is, right? That's not my content. But I would be focusing on, well, why did they use that word here? What does that mean in science to use that here? And so systemic functional linguistics doesn't look as language as separate from conversation or from meaning. Like, why do we use language? Is to have conversations, to make meanings. And so that's what we would be focused on. We would look at scientific texts, whether that's videos or charts and graphs or reading, and we would say, they wrote it this way, why? Why would we structure the sentence this way in English to mean something in science like that?
Do you know any local school districts that use this?
I do not,
Ideology.
actually. That would be a good thing to continue to research in, actually. That would be really good.
It wouldn't be hard to find professional development in it.
I don't believe so. Systemic functional linguistics has been around since the 90s. It's very specific to ESL students, which is an area that we're just now seeing a lot of growth and research in. But I think that with all the research that's been in there recently, we could find professional development on it easily.
Usually, so we don't currently have ELL.
We have 2 ELL students in the high school right now, which means the majority of teachers do not, right?
Oh, okay.
And the district saw a growth of 10 students in that area, but most of them are in elementary school, which means in a few years, we're going to get slammed with ELL students.
But they should probably.
Hopefully by the time they get to us, they will have a significant English proficiency. And so what our job and our responsibility is at that point is to make sure that what we're doing is that academic language in that meaning-making way. Because knowing how to speak English with your friends is a lot different than knowing how to write English and science or in social studies or in anything else like that.
What's the best advice you would give someone that might repeat your study or do a study like yours?
I would definitely suggest repeating this study with teachers that do have ESL students. There's always some bias with self-reported instruments, right? So that's gonna give us an idea of what people are actually doing with their ESL students. Probably be my best advice. I would be interested in seeing this because currently I have not found any studies that look at this specific question. But also I want to know, is it a lack of knowledge that causes the results that we see, those generalized modifications rather than specific modifications? I would say probably, but because that's not my study was on, I can't talk to that.
Right.
So I'd like to know what teachers know.
Why did you choose this question? What got you interested in it?
I'm actually very interested in implicit bias and how that affects students. That's difficult to study when we don't have ESL students, so this was a way for me to study implicit bias without studying implicit bias. I think that, I know. Well, I know that I experienced a lot of implicit bias in the school I went to because I was a lower socioeconomic student, and so I think that's something that teachers really need to be aware of. And I
So
thought
you
this
could
would
do
be
that
good.
study as well,
I would love to.
because you could get that information from.
Yes, yes. I would love to do that. Thank you guys. Thank you for staying.
If you didn't sign the sign-in sheet, please do that.
Yes, please do.
You need us to sign a flyer?
The world is done.